Mr. Bowman's here.
Here.
Mr. Gussenberg,
Here.
Ms. Harrigan,
Here.
Mr. Martelli,
Here.
Mr. Martinez,
Here.
Mr. Neff.
Here.
Ms. Nichols, Mr. Pangaro, Mr. Talbot,
Here.
Mr. Walsh.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum for acting chairman, Mr. Martinez.
Arnett, did you call my name?
Who? Who said that?
Tony Perugini.
I apologize. Is
Well,
Mr. Perugini in the building?
I am present.
Thank you. I skipped right over you. Sorry about that, Tony.
All right.
Oh, and Mr. Orris, apologies. Mr. Orris.
Thank you.
Council Chairman Orris. Sorry, I'm distracted. Okay.
All right, so it sounds like we have a quorum. So with that, please all stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God.
Individual.
All right, great. Well, thank you everyone and welcome back to the School Modernization Committee. I'm excited to see you all again. Trying to get our committee here back on track to our regular meeting. So before we start with our formal agenda, I would like to acknowledge Mrs. Anne Marie's camp resignation, and I would like to thank her for her service to this committee and to our community. She really did a great job, so I'm very thankful for that, and I think most of our committee members are as well. And with that, as the vice chair, I'll be taking the role of the acting chair until we as a committee decide it is appropriate to take a vote and elect a new chair, which I hope happens pretty soon. So, with that, I've been in conversation with a lot of you lately about our committee and our future. We decided to hold a meeting today. And to that purpose, we approved the agenda last Friday. We have some modifications to that agenda tonight, just so the conversation flows better. We're going to keep the same topic, so we're going to rearrange things a little bit. So the first topic that I have in the continuation of the agenda is just to get the approval for the meeting minutes of June 24th. So I would like to get a motion on the floor to get those meetings approved.
I think Sylvia's trying to.
So moved.
Second.
All right, perfect. So with the approval of the meetings, I would like to jump right to our next agenda topic. Tonight we have Mr. Chuck Warrington from Colliers, and I would like Colliers to give us a quick status update of where we stand. Some of this information had been shared with the committee a few days ago, but I would like Mr. Chuck and his team to just walk us through what has been done to date and what are our next milestones and look ahead for the next couple of weeks as far as activities go. So with that, Mr. Warrington.
Great, Renee. Thank you. Chuck Warrington with Colliers Project Leaders. John Koblis is on vacation, so it'll just be me tonight. Yeah, so it's been a little while, about 5-6 weeks since we've last met. Also, just real quick, I just wanted to introduce Mike Zuba and Rebecca Agur from Malone and McBroom. They're here with us tonight. They're going to give us a brief update from their end. They're the demographer that your committee chose to provide the background demographics and then future projections as well for the schools. I'm going to share my report. I think, Renee, I think you guys may have shared this with the committee. And I figure I would just maybe use this as our template. Okay. Everybody see that okay?
Yes. Yep.
You're able to see it? Okay. So,
Yep. Yes.
So a couple of weeks ago, we created this about a month ago, probably now, an owner's project management report and sent it to the chairs. And we reviewed this as well as our macro schedule. And I'll bring that up in a minute, but just kind of wanted to walk through this first, just in the format. We wanted to make it specific and kind of follow essentially our RFP is how we crafted. Everybody's taking a look at this. I'm trying to zoom in larger here. So for those who are on a smaller screen, hopefully you can see it okay. But essentially we followed the pre-referendum phase 1, phase 2 for option development, ultimately, and then in the pre-referendum phase 3, refinement of the preferred option, and then ultimately it would be in going into post-referendum phase 1 grant application submission. So we thought that format, and we're certainly open to any suggestions and any changes. We thought this format would work better in order to kind of follow the progress and to have the scope of the work in front of you on our reports instead of having to refer back to the RFP. Figure let us use that as a guide, and we'll provide statuses for each of these as we go. And again, I have a schedule. I'm going to kind of show you where we're at in the schedule as well that we've spoken with the one room also. So in the black is the phase, the blue are the actual tax that you assigned us in the RFP. And then the ABC sub bullets are kind of our commentary. So we reviewed all the available documentation of the existing facilities, the documentation you provided in the RFP, as well as any information from the school, from the Board of Ed as well. We had already started compiling that actually pre-interview as we went, but we've already processed a lot of that and started looking at the existing floor plans and kind of confirming some any square footages and areas of the buildings. Looking at what we call the EDO 050. That document is a state document that they create. And I'm going to show you one of those as an example that talks about how large a school is, the enrollment, and other factors of the bill. It's kind of a high-level document planning that the state of Connecticut uses for all the school districts and every school in the state itself. And I'm going to show you some of those examples as we go. For that. We looked to identify any weaknesses or gaps in the provided information. So at this point, we haven't identified any weaknesses in the existing information. However, as we proceed through the process and start looking at scenarios, we may see a need for additional information as that comes along, and we'll notify you of it as such. But right now, we have a pretty strong database of information to start from, if you will, for that. Number 3 is assisting the development of the demographics. So as you know, you've selected Malone and McBroom to provide the background demographics. They've been brought on board. We had a meeting about a month ago with Mike and Rebecca to discuss the information they need. And they've been kind of, they've been proceeding since about a month ago already, and getting the background information. And I'll let Mike and Rebecca opine on that after this and let them speak to that. And then the 4th item will be analyzing results of the enrollment projection to determine future space requirements. I'm going to show you a spreadsheet that we've created. It's relatively simple. Using the NESDEC numbers, back on June 3rd, we did receive NESDEC's projected enrollments of the existing schools. And we thought it'd be good to see a benchmark until Malone gets theirs. to evaluate where the size of the schools compare with your projected enrollments, and are there any that are really oversized or say undersized? And there's some interesting numbers there. They look pretty close to being the right size, plus or minus for that. Not getting into phase 2 because we haven't gotten option development yet. But that's basically where we're at, is all the existing information we have, and we're ready to go for the next phase, pending Malone McBroom's information. When we were talking about the program floor plan and spreadsheet documentation, what we did is Vinny was able to provide us floor plans of each of the schools, and these are to scale. And this is just one example. We've done it for all the schools in the district. And what we were doing, is you can see on this drawing, we use a document called a software called Bluebeam, and we're able to scale the documents to procure the square footage for each area. And if you, I'll zoom in here, hopefully, so you can see in each room, we basically draw a line around it and using a scale, and it'll tell us, the square footage. So you can see there's almost 890 square feet in one, 882. And so we did that for the entire building. We did the classrooms, we did the corridors, because that's your circulation space. We did bathrooms. If I go to the next page in this document, and you'll see gymnasium, music, art, all the different program areas for that, because as we move forward to developing the options, what's really important is that we understand the information we have and what's available. Many times, towns, districts, we want to get to the options and choosing what the future's options are going to be, but we really need to take the time to really get good data on the physical conditions and areas of the buildings, in addition to the demographics as well. So you can see how, again, multiple different colors for different types of the program in different square footages, as well as identifying the entire gross square foot of the building, if you will. From this document, and John Koplis did a lot of this, he essentially created, and this is the corresponding one, I'm going to blow this one up again. This spreadsheet basically takes those floor plans and transposes the numbers in a tabular form, classroom by classroom, the square footage of each classroom in the summary, administrative areas, as you can see, the administrative principal's office, conference room, nurse, etc., cafeteria, gym, those general spaces, library, so on and so forth. So those are what we call the assignable areas. And then essentially all the support spaces of your boiler rooms, toilets, circulation, and essentially create an inventory of all your spaces. And again, this is all within the lump sum of phase. And we felt this effort was a worthwhile effort to do, because as we go forward, we can now manipulate the information going forward. And all this is available to any of you. We have a pretty deep file structure for all your facilities, and then we basically, what we're doing is we're adding up what we calculate the square footage to be, and then we're going to calculate that and look against what we call the ED050. I'm going to show you that. This comes from the state of Connecticut. Anybody can access these. If you were to look up the ED050 for the state of Connecticut, they would bring you to this website. You can search by district, then by school, and it's a simple download. So this isn't anything top secret per se. What we're looking at here is really what I'm most interested in is the year construction and then the total square footage of the building. In this case, you can see 51,200. The state of Connecticut uses that when they're looking at the program space in the grant application, and they're looking at a school and they're going, okay, what's your enrollment? And I'll show you those calculations in a minute. And how does that compare to the existing school, et cetera, for your space standard requirements. Again, these are all available. We've downloaded for every school. There's a lot of other information here. However, excuse me, I'm sorry. A lot of stuff that, we can get into, but the biggest thing is I want to see what the square footage in the general classrooms and in the year of construction for that. Shows the grades, et cetera, for that. So taking all this information I just kind of showed you, again, this is just data. It's factual. It's not nothing subjective, but it's giving us an idea of, how big's your schools? Are they oversized, undersized, and so forth. And so what we've done is create a very simple spreadsheet summarizing all your schools in kind of the year they're built, how old, the grades, current enrollment, the highest 8-year enrollment. Again, that's from NASDAQ. When Malone gets theirs, we'll substitute these numbers. And here, this is that ED050 square footage of the building I just showed you. And then we also have a column for the space standard. I'm gonna get into these two numbers in a minute because it's going to be important as we start looking at options for the future, and it's going to start telling a story to a certain degree and kind of guiding us and Malone and yourselves and going, okay, which buildings do we focus on in combination with physical conditions of buildings, et cetera. But this is just one factor that the state of Connecticut will look for when they're looking at your master plan. The space standard, if anybody doesn't know, is basically it's a statutory calculation that the state of Connecticut uses when schools submit a grant application. They in a simplified form say you hire a demographer like Malone, and you tell us what your highest 8-year projection is after your grant application in future years. And they'll take that number and they'll multiply it by a number of factors, square foot per student. And it tells them, according to their system, this is what the size of the building should be. And that's what they're going to gauge your reimbursement off of. What's important about that is we want to be very close to 100%, 90% ratio. And I'll explain what those are in a second here. But if you're anything less than, say, 85% and you put a grant application on this ratio, the state of Connecticut's going to push back unless it's an existing building for that. I'm going to zoom in here just a tad bit so we can see this side of these three columns here. So again, this is the existing building area of the building, inside face of exterior walls. This is the space standard. These numbers here are connect to all these worksheets at the bottom where you see SS, that's space standard. So we did one for each of your schools, and I'll show you that in a minute. And then the space standard ratio in bold here, okay, it's essentially the space standard calculation divided by the existing area. And basically, if you're under 100%, it means your building's slightly bigger or it's bigger than the space standard. If it's over 100%, you're under. So it means you could actually build more space if you theoretically wanted to, if it's over 100%. Anything in between 90 to 100%, you're really close according to the state. They're going to say you're right sized, if you will. As you can see for Darcy, that's early intervention. That's a little bit of a unique building. That's 84%. The only one that maybe sticks out a little bit is the high school. You see that's about 87%. But again, it's an existing building. The space standard for your enrollment for 8-year high is about 242,000. The existing building shown is 278,000. So not too bad. It's still pretty decent. If we were to, one of the options says, hey, let's look at the high school first, for example, or as renovation, whatever have you, we would be talking to the state and saying, okay, we're based upon our enrollment numbers, subject to Malone updating them, we're about 87% of the space standard. Now, we're going to be bigger. They're not going to make you chop off the building. But what it does say is they're not going to allow you to add to it either, based upon these numbers. And that's what districts, it's important for a district to know is that although you think you need more space, the state of Connecticut is going to go, you're already bigger than the space standard, so they're going to have a hard time supporting more space when you're already showing 36,000 square feet more. That's quite a bit. That's quite a bit of square footage for it. But what this table's doing in summary is just giving us on these percentages, giving us an idea of where your schools are at. You can see most of them are close to 100. You're pretty much right sized if you kept them the same size, kept all the schools in play, and didn't close or consolidate right now. And then the high school, again, you're at 87%. So again, before we start getting into, and this is a little, it might sound a little bit boring, but when we get into the options, this information is going to tell us where should we look, where are there any deficiencies as far as space wise goes. Doesn't take into account your physical conditions, but right now everything's pretty much right size for the most part. So then it'll tell us look at the physical conditions at that point. I'm just going to show you one of the space standard calculations. This document, I don't know if anybody's ever seen this, but this is a spreadsheet. This is from the state. We've kind of adopted it in our spreadsheet to manipulate it. But at the top, you see the grades, and what it says is you look, and I'll try to zoom in here a little bit more. We look at the left, and it's depending on what your enrollment projection is for the school. You know, we're going to say, hey, look at these, and actually these should be a little bit higher. We're saying 391. These should actually be in this range here. We'll correct those. And then it'll take a calculation, it'll take the average, you put in the number of grades, and it basically spits this out. So this number is going to get adjusted. These were old numbers. And it'll tell you that, you know, this is what the maximum square footage will be. That's going to come down a little bit on this school here for that. And then what we do is we compare it to existing size school. But essentially this calculation, this is what we use. Again, this has to be submitted with grant applications. When you first talk to the state and say, this is a project we want to do, Michelle Dixon, who's up at OSCGR, she's going to go, I want to see that. I want to see what your space standard calc is. If we're in the meeting, she's going to ask me right away, Chuck, where's our space standard calc? And I'll be able to tell her that information. So yeah, so long-winded. I apologize for that being a little bit longer. That's what kind of we've been doing is, again, tabulating information so we get to the next step, we're ready to go. And we have all this information at our fingertips, square footages, floor plans, enrollments. Again, we're going to update those when Malone and McBroom come in and get theirs updated as well. The last thing I just want to kind of show is this is what we call our macro schedule. What we did is we took a shot at laying out by phase again, try to keep it consistent with our OPM update. Pre-referendum phase 1, you see the purple is in phase 2. And again, I apologize for being a little bit small. I'll blow it up here. And activities that are going to have to occur. Same thing for pre-referendum phase 3, and then ultimately pre-referendum, phase 1. Now this is a schedule we look at based upon our experience, talking with Malone and laying out the activities that we think are going to be occurring in this process. The red bar here, the dashed line, indicates where we're at. We're beginning of August here. As you can see, it shows Malone, really in the heart of their comprehensive enrollment analysis, and pretty soon engaging in facilities utilization and functional capacity. And again, I'll let Mike and Rebecca opine on that a little bit further. These red dots along the top, these are just the weeks of your meetings. And again, this is a very simple scheduling tool. It's not meant to be complex. It's supposed to be more graphic in nature, hopefully easy to read for it. But it's going to kind of help guide us, and it basically shows us in about another 6 weeks getting that existing demographic study done, and then we'll come back to the committee in late September, and mostly going to be from a Malone and McBroom. What's the demographics telling us? What's the utilization? They're going to talk about their entire study, their birth rates, and migration, immigration, all that good stuff that they talk about that we solicit their services for. And then in the next phase, and early, heavy part of October, is Malone and Colliers. We're going to be looking at this information as well as the committee, and going, what are the kind of options we're looking at? We're looking at taking existing facilities conditions, other challenges that the district may have, and start developing different scenarios And then if any of those scenarios take into account either closing a school, redistricting in some way, shape, or form, moving students, Malone will modify those and give us revised projections, which will then put them in that space standard calc that you saw, and ultimately develop a range of costs for the different scenarios across the board. So again, that space standard really drives a lot of information and a lot of issues on a project for that. Then ultimately we've identified, and that's again subject to your committee, submitting hopefully a grant application for your first project or projects in whatever master plan that you select moving forward. We show the phase 2, you can see kind of goes through December of again, the different scenarios. And then hopefully when we come back from the winter break, your committee and the town as a whole is selecting your first project to proceed. And at that point, that's where we do a deeper dive. We get into the specifics. We do some preliminary, and we might do geotechnical borings if it's a new school, hazardous materials investigations, and we'll help procure those services as part of our scope for that. Working with the Board of Ed to develop ed specs, finalizing the actual budget for your review, ultimately for approval by town council and the governing bodies. We'll be doing cash flow projections. So again, that's in really 2021, and the hope is to get all that approved. A lot of concurrency going on in order to submit a grant application, which is due by June 30 of each year. Otherwise, we got to wait an entire year. As you can see here, we're showing a lot of red boxes, which are indicating meetings, whether it's the Board of Ed, your committee, town council, they have to, approve, potentially go into a referendum for that. I don't know, based upon our schedule, we don't necessarily see a referendum likely in the spring, but that's again, up to the town, totally up to you for that. And then hopefully, I think, initially, potentially maybe a fall referendum. But again, this is our first crack, our first draft. But with that, I think that's kind of what we've been working on to kind of get us going here. I apologize for the level of detail, but if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
I have a question. I'm sorry, did anyone, if you have any questions, please raise your hands. I do have a question, Chuck. In terms of the 502 form and right sizing of the schools, what I saw on the spreadsheet was that most of the schools have a ratio of under 100%, yet, which means that the schools have more than adequate space, yet when we visited the schools and the classrooms, a lot of the feedback we received is that they're too small. But when we look at these numbers, it looks like they're either adequate or too large. What's your opinion on that?
That's a good question, Renee. With the ones that are, showing adequate, like for example, Chapman on our numbers here, Chapman, Norton, and Highland are showing just over 100%, which would mean you have adequate space. What the space standard doesn't account for, like I said, you're doing tours, you're talking to teachers, administrators, and from an operational sense, they could always use more space. It doesn't matter. You can go all around the state of Connecticut, you can always use more space. The state of Connecticut's looking at it from more of a funding aspect, but what's not typically accounted for here are some of the special ed programs, 21st century programs that are going into elementary schools, such as OT and PT programs. If you have a medically fragile or an autism type program that requires some space, Certainly special education are all incorporated into the schools now. They're mainstreaming them into the schools. And when these space standards were developed, from what I've seen in my experiences, they didn't necessarily take those into account. So when we're looking at these, we also have to talk with the Board of Ed and talk about their actual program, because they may have program. This doesn't look at special programs. We have to look at a school by school basis and go, okay, yeah, it's showing you have enough, but when I take these other programs in, the building maybe should be another 20,000 square feet, for example. So this is really a snapshot. It doesn't tell the whole story. It doesn't take into account maybe that special program that's required for a specific school. So when you do that, they may go reverse. You may say we're short and we may have to do an addition of an X amount of size. But the state of Connecticut, say if we're looking at Chapman and we said we want to do an addition, they're going to go, well, why do you need the addition? And we're going to say, well, here's the programs we need. Here's the calculated spaces. If say if it's a renovation, we're going to show all the programming and the square footage, and then go, here's the new programming that we need, and here's our ratios, and we can justify it that way. So this isn't, I'll say, an absolute final to say you have enough space. This is just one of the indicators that the state's going to look at.
I see. Thank you, Chuck. Richard, Mr. Gothenberg.
Let's see, I'm not muted. Okay. Chuck, come, what was it, October, you said we'd start taking a look at some of the program options. What kind of information are you going to give us about the state of each of the buildings and what needs to be done to those schools if we were to renovate versus if we were to do new construction?
Great question there. So in our scope of work, and it all depends on a case-by-case basis, there isn't a scope of work to do what we call facilities condition assessment on the existing schools, if you will. And a facilities condition assessment is a pretty in-depth look into the school. There has been some by Perkins Eastman that I think, from looking at those, that I think we can use a lot of as our basis. So I don't think we need to redo that effort. But we would combine that, and we'd want to do some site visits as well, to look at a school, and based upon our experience, we can walk through a school, look at the age of the building, review those reports by Perkins Eastman. We bring our mechanical folks in on our MEP side and look at the age of your transformers, your rooftop units, your boilers, and we'd be able to get a sense of, is this school a good candidate for a renovation project? And that's a very specific statutory term. But as far as the renovation portion goes, we would take all those components, we'd do a site visit, look at Perkins Eastman's reports, and then look and go, okay, is the physical building a good candidate? Is there a lot of ADA concerns for accessibility to the code? It's a judgment call. Me as a structural engineer, John Copus is an architect. We have our MEP support as well, and collectively looking and making a kind of a high level assessment. And depending if there's an addition required, if you say we're going to renovate and add, we'd have to look at the site from a high level and go, is there even any room to put it? You have to look at the site, look at your parking, look at the size of the property, the grades, all those factors into that. If it's a new building, to say replace that existing building, some of the factors we'd be looking at is it on the same site? Because in order to do that, typically you're going to be, we've had projects now we're working on where we're building a brand new school on a site that can support building a new while maintaining the existing operation. So we would be looking at those options. Again, if the conditions are so bad, he said, listen, it's not worth renovating. And sometimes the state of Connecticut has said, listen, we're not going to participate in a renovation because it's going to cost us too much. That may be the case, but we'll look at both and develop budgets for both, and look at we'll do what we call a district share calculator. And what that'll do is we'll say, okay, for a new construction, your reimbursement is X, which is 10% less than a renovation project. And we'll estimate what it's going to cost the district to build new versus doing a renovation status. So apologize, a lot of detailed information there, but we're going to look at a lot of different factors when analyzing renovation versus building new.
And the renovation number will be a renovate as new?
Yeah, so let me just touch upon that a little bit if I could, Richard. So the renovate is new, renovate like new, renovation status is a very specific requirement that 75% of the existing building has to be 30 years or older. We have to renovate that much at a minimum. And we also have to provide, there's two ways to gain a renovation status. One of them is through notwithstanding legislation that you'd go to your local state representatives and senators to develop notwithstanding legislation, and that basically gets voted on by the legislatures and essentially say we're granting renovation status. What that does, it says when you get renovation status, everything inside the property line and work in the building is eligible, and that's where you reduce your costs, is getting everything eligible. The other way to get renovation status is administratively through OSCGR. That is the recommended way to procure it, because in that case you're working with that office to procure that, and that's the way they prefer it. If we were to submit a grant application for a renovation status, we're doing that currently. What the state said is we want you to, and there's a letter with about 12 points that requires a district to hire a licensed architect to study the building structurally, seismically, the building envelope, and a few others, and basically certify that the building can be renovated to certain standards, new building codes, accessibility codes, whatever have you. Send that letter, submit it to the state, and they would administratively grant renovation status, if you will. So gaining renovation status, what's really important when we're estimating the cost of the work, we'll put together the budget, but then we're estimating your district share. We're going to give you a range because we'll say, hey, if you don't get renovation status, it becomes alterations. Now what happens, your ineligible costs go up, which means your district share goes up as well. Some districts say, listen, if we're not going to get renovation status, we're not going to do it. That's a decision that this committee would decide, but we would educate you on what those numbers are estimated to be for that. So yeah, if it's a renovation status, there's very specific criteria. As we get farther into that, we'll show you all those documents and tell you what those are.
Thanks.
Renee, I have a question.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Okay, we have Chuck and then we have Don. I'm sorry, Chuck's been raising his hand since earlier and I wasn't quite noticing. Go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, so just back to your summary spreadsheet there, if you could, Chuck.
Sure,
I had
absolutely. Yeah.
Two questions.
Yeah.
One, is there not a space standard for the alternate high school? And how does that weigh in, like in the application, I guess?
Yeah, I was looking at that, Chuck, and I don't think we have the updated 8-year enrollment. That's the reason I don't have that. As you can see right here, I don't have an 8-year enrollment for that. I can assume probably 30 on that. And it's usually about 180 square feet per student. So if I did a high level calculate, and I think it's combined with a central office, so we just have to confirm the square footage. 30 times 80, that's only about 5,400 square feet, according to my calculations. So we'd have to get the projected enrollment. Usually that's just going to come right from the Board of Ed on that. And that's why I don't have that one.
Got it. And the second question was column G. Can you just clarify for me? That's the projected enrollment that will come from Milona McBroom, or is that the rolling 8-year enrollment currently?
So these numbers will get updated from Milona McBroom when they do their background and their process of that, and Michael and Rebecca will talk about that. For the time being, we had, and it's really small, I do apologize. We had asked NESDEC, who is the current, or the former, I should say, demographer, update us on the elementary schools, because there's multiple ones. The middle school, obviously, there's only one. High school is only one, so it's pretty straightforward. But this data here, I apologize again for being small. So you see Chapman, they they projected by grade in each school all the way out to school year 2027, 2028, the highlighted years of the future 8. And
Yep.
what we did is we took that number for the total and kind of plugged it into that summary in our comparison. So you can see the 391. I just do a link, so if the number changes, we update it. But this is the current 8-year projection from NASDAQ.
Thank you.
All right. Don, please go ahead.
Thanks, Renee. Hey, Chuck, a quick question on the space standard. With the COVID in the last 4 months, how much will that change, or do you foresee it changing? And I mean, I have to believe that the building of new schools in the next 5 years is going to be drastically different than they may have been 5 months ago before this. And I'm just wondering, is the space standard going to increase as we're in the middle of this project, or do you foresee that happening?
Great question, Don. And in all honesty, your guess is probably as good as mine at this point, because we're so fresh into this pandemic. So we really don't know at this point. I mean, the state of Connecticut's, they don't even know how to tell the districts how to proceed, let alone, the new construction. So is there a possibility that that will change? Given my experience with that office and how they look at just enrollments, period, I think if it does, I don't foresee that happening very rapidly. I think they're probably gonna wait at least until next year, and I'm guessing here. I haven't talked to them, but I'd be surprised if it changes too quickly, because in the analogy I'll use, and Mike Zuba could probably opine on this too, he sees it is when we see a rapid rise in enrollment in a district that's out of character. A lot of you are familiar with South Windsor, that happened there. The first year where we kind of take a pause and we're like, wait a minute, is this a bubble? Is this just a short trend? And then it's going to come back to, say, normal levels, if you will. In a similar vein, this is a pandemic that's on the initial evaluation saying you need to build bigger schools, right? And so I think if I was to guess, and I haven't talked to Casa Diamantis on this, he's been very busy with the pandemic. My guess would be that he'd be like, we're going to take a wait and see approach, and we want to see how this thing plays out for the time being. They're not going to take, I don't see them taking a knee-jerk reaction to the pandemic unless it continues, and this is really a long-term issue we got to deal with. If so, they'll modify them. I'd be surprised, just because based on cost, again, just my personal opinion and no basis from conversation. If they were to go, we're saying a 6-foot social distancing, right? I'd be surprised if they go to that size, because you'd almost double the size of schools, or close there too. And then obviously your costs go up exponentially. I think what they're probably going to do is say, let's invest in our MEP systems, our mechanical ventilation systems. There's systems out there that are using light technology for neutralization, increase in ventilation. I could definitely see those requirements being modified, probably more so on the fly than formal, because we already have Connecticut high performance standards. So I could see that happening. So the answer is we don't know what it's going to be. We're going to monitor it. We work with that office quite often. I'm typically in their office and talk to their teams every couple of weeks at a minimum, and they usually let us know when there's updates. So we'll have to monitor it as we go, and we start developing these budgets and ed specs and estimates. We're going to have to be cognizant of that. And what's really important is when we start understanding what some of these options are, we're going to want to go meet with the state to share this information with them, because you want them to be a partner with you. And then that way we can ask those questions of them as well.
Well, that's what, because at what point in the calendar of this process do we really have to start worrying about those changes?
I think once we get through some of the, we're going to have some conversations with them, and I'm working with them all the time, so I'll be able to advise if I hear anything new. But as far as if we just look at our schedule and we start, refining the options towards the end of this year, early next year is when we're saying, hey, refine these options and looking at a specific project or projects to proceed with. Late this year, early next year is when we're going to want to set up a meeting with the state, share with them all the work we're doing together, but with superintendent and building committee chair and other whoever wants to come up to the meeting, say, here's our program, this is what we're looking at, here's our Malone will be there, here's our projections, and this is what we're seeing for the first school, if you will. And then that's going to be when we're going to say, okay, does the school need to be bigger? Is there a different standard? We also need to, in whatever project, say if it's a new project, if you will, or even renovation, we want to certainly by identifying opportunities for expansion, if necessary, as an alternative that, okay, if we do a new school, can we expand off of one wing, if you will, or off to one side of it, whatever have you, one corner, if we need to add 3 more classrooms. We just did that in South Windsor. We added 2 classrooms in the middle of construction because of enrollment. But in a similar, I'm kind of using that as a comparison because if it's requiring more space, the key thing is, I think, keeping those conversations going with the state. But I see that happening late this year, early next year, when we start seeing a clear picture of where you want to go.
Good. Thanks, Chuck. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Any additional questions for Mr. Warrington on the items that have been presented so far? Please raise your hand. All right, Chuck, do you have any other items on your agenda?
No, nothing for me, Chairman, Vice Chair. For that, again, as we're proceeding through the next month, again, and if anybody doesn't have these documents, we're more than happy to resend them through Renee for it. But as then you can see, Malone in the next, month or so, he's really going to be wrapping up their existing, but I'll let Malone kind of opine on that and give you more of an accurate update on that.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Warrington. Appreciate your time today and all the information. Again, this is all data that we have and that was sent a couple days ago. So if there's any additional follow-up questions, I'm sure Mr. Warrington and his team will be more than open to get those answered for us.
Absolutely.
All right, great. The next item on our agenda is discussion of the possible action regarding the town council decision last week. And before we jump into that, I do have a few opening remarks in regards to that issue, because I've been talking to most of you recently, and we've been in touch, and I've been reflecting upon how have we gotten to where we are today. We have been working as a group for the last 9 months now. We started in November of last year, and so far, I think this group has completed some pretty remarkable milestones. We have met with a large number of members of the committee. We have visited most of the schools, and we have also reached out to school districts that are even outside of Cheshire. And I think that the information we have collected so far and the feedback has been great. So I commend all the volunteer committee members for the work done. So you can see in the Colliers report, we're still, however, long ways to go. There's still a lot of work to be done, not only crunching the numbers, but also making the hard decisions that will come after those numbers are all put together. Unfortunately, we all know what happened on June 1st. I condemn the words that were used against the woman of our committee, and I hope that had never happened. However, we're in the position that we're at today. And fast forward a couple weeks, we've suffered a couple challenges as a committee. Starting with the divisiveness against amongst ourselves. We had the recent event last week when, unfortunately, Mrs. Ann Kemp resigned from our committee. And then prior to that, we had the action taken by the town council that was not well taken by a lot of the committee members or the school modernization committee members, including myself. Don't believe that that action was decisive enough or provided enough guidance to our committee on how to act or respond to the events that happen, because our committee is ill-equipped to deal with these types of issues. So, however, despite all of that, I've been reflecting a lot about this over the weekend because I'm thinking big picture. How do we move forward? The mission that we have here is just way too important, and I've been just like a lot of you investing a lot of time thinking and trying to figure this out, trying to see how we move forward and what is the best path. And then in the middle of that, I was thinking, why are we doing all of this? And the answer is, and I want to share a picture with you, is because of the kids. These are my two kids. This is Amelia, she's just one, and this is Joaquin. He's 4. He's about to turn 5, and he's going to start in the Cheshire school system actually, hopefully this year. And in 10 years from now, I want to be able to tell Joaquin and Amelia that they're going to a proper school, that is a decent school. I don't want to tell them that they're not attending or having a quality education because as a group today or 10 years ago, we couldn't get along, or we couldn't put our passions behind, our egos behind, and just move forward with our very important mission. I think that no one here and no cause is bigger than our kids. And I think as we make decisions on what we have at hand, we just need to be cognizant that we were chosen for a reason and that we need to move forward. So my question to all the committee members is, how do we move out of the gridlock that we're in right now, and how do we keep progressing forward? So kids like Joaquin and Amelia, 10 years from now, can enjoy a decent education, and not only them, but also the other 4,000 kids that are part of the Cheshire school system. So I'm hoping that we can find a way today. I'm hoping that in a civilized manner, we can all discuss these issues and come to a resolution. A couple people have called me and expressed that they want to have a conversation today and they want to make statements on the issue today. So I think it's proper for the committee to hear that as part of this healing process, part of this process that we need to go through to get past this. So that's what we're going to be doing next. Some people have expressed interest for their statements to be done in executive session. We consulted with the town attorney. It sounds like this being a personnel issue, it qualifies for executive session. However, someone needs to call for a motion to do that. So if moving towards executive session is desired, I encourage someone to call a motion to enter executive session to discuss the possible actions or to have a discussion and take possible action regarding the town council resolution. And that will include the members of this committee, Mr. Al Smith, who is our town council. Does anyone want
So
to make
moved.
the motion?
So moved.
Does anyone second that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, so Mr. Smith, correct me if I'm wrong, but now the procedure is to put this to a vote, right?
Yes, and under the Freedom of Information Act, it requires a 2/3 majority to do that because the executive session was not listed on the agenda.
Do we-
Sure.
Can I ask a question? This is Anne. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Do we have discussion about this before we vote? Because my question is simply, you mentioned that some of us wanted to make comments publicly. Would that come after the executive session if we want to do that?
It could.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so I would like to start a vote. We're moving into executive session with the members of the School Modernization Committee plus Mr. Al Smith, our town attorney. Who is in favor? All right, I think we have the 2/3 required. Did you get a formal counter, Annette?
No, I don't know if Marilyn got that. If you just want to raise your hands again, I can take it for the clerk. So the yay, Renee, Matt, Sylvia, Rich. Oh, you all just moved. Andrew, Chuck, you said Sylvia, Peter, Don, and Tony. Did I miss anybody? Okay, so those were the yays for the record.
All right, so now there was a second Zoom link sent in case that this executive motion was called. So what we need to do, those who were invited, need to quit the Zoom meeting and then rejoin using that second link. And I'll see you on the other side. Does anyone wants to make a statement following or resuming our standard meeting?
I'd like to make a statement.
Please go ahead, Ms. Bay.
Thank you. I feel disrespected, obviously. And I'm on the fence, to be honest, as to whether or not I'm going to stay on this committee. This meeting is going to help me determine my next steps. I felt disrespected, and I felt disrespected again once the town council decided not to do anything about this. So in order for me to be able to proceed on this committee, I need to know that there will be respect for the remainder of all of the meetings from all committee members. To get to the heart of the matter, I need to know from Mr. Bowman what statements, actions, or behaviors caused him to express the statement that all of the women on this committee were expletive idiots. Does Mr. Bowen care to answer that question?
I'm sorry, you were breaking up. Would you please repeat it?
Sure. I would like to know what statements, actions, or behaviors that I had caused you to express the statement that all of the women on this committee were expletive idiots. What is it that we did so that we can get to the bottom of this?
I have no comment for that.
Okay. So the behavior of the women on this committee has been nothing but respectful. None of the women on this committee were rude or disrespectful to fellow coworkers or colleagues or committee members. None of the women on this committee were condescending, demeaning, or demanding of CPS, Cheshire Public School, or town officials. None of the women on this committee failed to prepare for meetings. None of the women on this committee were absent for the majority of the meetings in the winter. None of the committee members, none of the female committee members posted taunting memes on their Facebook page to make light of this situation. If someone had done all of those things, I would expect that person to be removed. I appreciate the town council condemning your behaviors. However, that is something that I expect of anyone, anytime, to condemn disrespectful behavior. I don't expect any town councilor to agree with your comments. In the moment, things are said for sure, but those are the moments that count. When having a conversation with someone, I expect everybody, especially our town council leaders, to stand up to this behavior and strike it down rather than agree with it. I would like a guarantee that this is going to be a safe, supportive, and productive meeting from now on. And until I feel that safety, I will end up resigning. Because now I am second guessing everything that I say and do because of your comments. I know I am intelligent. I know I am not an idiot. But I will not put up with disrespect. I will stand up for women in this committee, and I will walk away to show everyone here that I will not be disrespected. I am volunteering my time, and I will not put up with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bate. Mrs. Harrigan?
So I have a prepared statement. And I'd like to start by expressing my deep disappointment at losing Anne-Marie Kemp as chair of this committee. Anne-Marie is a pleasure to work with, and as chair, she ran the meetings with grace and skill. Her leadership on this committee has been instrumental in getting this committee to hear from all constituencies as we have been moving forward with the daunting but important charge of improving our aged school facilities. Anne-Marie's professionalism guided us through meetings that always allowed for the diverse voices of the committee to be included, in the conversation each time we met. The amount of time our community volunteers have been willing to contribute to the work of this committee has been amazing, and I thank each and every one of you. Having real community involvement with people from diverse backgrounds and areas of expertise is a very real asset for any committee. For it is by listening to the variety of ideas that unique individuals bring to the table that makes us consider and reevaluate our own positions and challenge the status quo. This is what was so special about the SMC until the evening of our June 1st meeting, when two of our members, Rob Orris and Matt Bowman, were overheard exchanging denigrating language targeted at the women on the committee. The verbal assault from these two male members of the committee, aimed specifically at the 4 female members, was by all accounts not meant to be heard, but it was heard, and it was appalling, and it was hurtful. More importantly, it changed the collegial dynamic of our committee. When something that poisonous infiltrates a group dynamic, the obvious response is to remove the offensive elements so that the committee can regroup and move on with their important work. What should have happened was an apology from Matt Bowman, followed by his resignation from the committee, and an apology from Rob Orris, followed by his recusal as ex officio to this committee. If those actions had happened on June 2nd, or 3rd, or 4th, or any time in June, quite frankly, or July, then the group could have quickly reassigned those positions and proceeded with the important work that we do. But that's not what happened. Instead of taking responsibility for the deplorable behavior, instead of acknowledging the harm of their words, they chose instead to dig in their heels and downplay the importance of those words, to make excuses for their behavior, to distract and divert from the issues of hostility aimed at women that permeates our town governance among our elected leaders. No town-appointed committee has the authority to remove one of its members. So in light of the fact that there was no resignation coming from Matt Bowman, the only recourse the committee had was to request that the town council take that action for us. So that's what we did. In a formal letter submitted by our chairperson to the council, we asked to have Matt Bowman removed. The process involved an investigation conducted by a town-appointed attorney, followed by a report presented to the council in executive session at their meeting last Tuesday. I was extremely disappointed when I heard that the town council did not, in fact, take a vote to remove Matt Bowman from the committee, but instead voted to have the SMC reconvene, as we have done here this evening, to reconsider if perhaps we should just accept an apology from Matt, an extremely late apology, I might add, and let the whole matter rest. This was an unacceptable response from the council. This council had made it pretty clear that they are more concerned with protecting their own than they are with making things right for a committee whose work they espouse to be so important to the town. Sending the decision back to the SMC to reconsider is extremely disrespectful, especially to the women of the committee, who are essentially being told that we don't matter, that our voices are less important than those of our male counterparts, that our concerns are not valued. More importantly, a culture of hostility towards women in town leadership is being perpetuated when our mostly male colleagues keep closing the doors to women's participation, or when women are invited to the table and then they are treated so disrespectfully that they resign in frustration. I respect Ms. Kemp's decision to resign from the committee. I suspect that her decision was based on much more than just this one incident. A woman in a leadership position who veers from the deeply ingrained ideals of a male established leadership is systematically undermined. And that is, in effect, what the council did by sending this decision to remove Matt Bowman back to the committee. Instead of supporting the committee's request to remove an obstructive member, the result is that we've lost a very valuable leader in Anne Marie Kemp. I will end with this plea to Matt Bowman. The easiest way to get this committee to move forward with its charge, a charge that I know is very important to you, Matt. I've heard you say so. The most expedient way for us to go on is for you to resign from the committee. We need to begin healing as a committee, and that means replacing you and Rob with colleagues we can respect and trust that we are not being maligned every time we offer our contributions that may not align with yours. To Rob Orris, I would ask that you acknowledge your part in that abhorrent exchange of insults aimed at the women of this committee and recuse yourself as ex officio over this committee. It is astonishing to me that the person who holds the highest office among our elected town leaders would engage in such a verbal attack against his colleagues and community volunteers instead of shutting down that conversation in its tracks. Moreover, it is the responsibility of the town council chairperson to lead his council to taking action that helps people of this town. Instead, you were publicly silent, and it would seem that privately you rallied your council to inaction when the SMC came asking for help. I thank everyone for listening. I have agonized over what I would say here tonight because this issue at hand is not that a couple of people were overheard making rude comments about 4 others. The incident on June 1st is indicative of how our established town leadership keeps others from participating in our community governance. It's important to me that we get community participation from as many diverse viewpoints as possible. Everyone in this town should feel comfortable sharing their ideas, but that won't happen if we let our elected leaders speak so disparagingly about others with no consequences for the misbehavior and no acknowledgement of the harm they have created. This conversation is difficult. It's difficult for me to say this tonight, but I believe we need to have this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harrigan. Mr. Talbot?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I have become incredibly frustrated with the lack of action by 6 members of the town council. For me, this issue has unfortunately become more about the council's lack of fortitude than the incident that spawned it. On June 9th, the School Modernization Committee Chair asked the council to consider removing a member. In accordance with Town Charter, Section 3-12B, an independent investigation was conducted. In my opinion, the resolution that the town council voted on Tuesday night, July 28th, was carefully orchestrated and had been written and decided upon prior to hearing the results of the investigation. The town council had 2 choices that night: to vote to suspend or to take no action. The option should never have been to drop this back in the lap of the School Modernization Committee. It was inappropriate for the governing authority to turn around and tell the committee, we choose not to make a decision and we want you to make it instead. Oh, by the way, if the SMC did vote in favor of removal, the issue would again have to go back to the town council. I personally want to apologize to this committee. This is not what you volunteered for. This has all been a tremendous distraction from the great and incredibly important work that you are doing for this community. Tomorrow morning, I will tender my resignation from the School Modernization Committee to the town clerk. I wish the committee all the best and a swift return to the duties you were appointed for. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Mrs. Nichols?
Let me unmute. Yes. While I agree with much of what has just been said, and as a recipient of those comments, it has been my normal operation to make decisions based on facts. And I would like to read a statement which may have some bearing on what has been discussed here and will at least give you some understanding of why I was concerned about making a decision, because I felt that not all of the facts had been talked about, or we hadn't gotten answers to those. And I still stand by some of the things that I said. So let me start. On the first, it was June 1st was one of the SMC committee members was overheard. What turned out to be a phone conversation in which Mr. Bowman made some unpleasant comments about the women on the committee. Unpleasant is an understatement. I was personally appalled by the tone and the substance of the words. In a very knee-jerk reaction, I had an exchange with Arnett Talbot the following morning regarding the way to deal with this, including the possibility of accepting an apology from Mr. Bowman. Another member of the committee had suggested that he be removed from the committee immediately. Ms. Talbot, in an email on June 5th, replied there was a process that must be followed by the committee to request that the town council remove him. The whole process was then turned over to the committee chair, Ms. Kemp, for review. I inquired as to whether the committee needed to vote and was told that it was not necessary to take an actual vote. I indicated my support of the action removal if it was agreed upon by the entire committee. There was ongoing discussion all the time from June 1st regarding the possibility of Mr. Bowman apologizing, and I was told by Ms. Kemp that he had refused to apologize. That was the last direct communication I had with either Ms. Talbot or Ms. Kemp on the matter until I inquired of Ms. Kemp as to the progress of the committee. At that time, I was told there was full support of the committee to move forward with the request for removal of Mr. Bowman. Once the matter came to the council, we sought procedural advice and counsel from the town attorney. The process was turned over to an investigative attorney who interviewed the committee members who actually overheard the call. By the time the investigation was complete, the comments were corroborated. As an elected official and as a council member, I sat on that council. We had very vocal deliberations before sending this back to the SMC committee. On reflection, my initial knee-jerk reactions were replaced by fact-finding. I felt it was appropriate to get answers from the committee to some of the questions asked by the TC members. Was Mr. Bowman given an opportunity to apologize? Was the position to remove Mr. Bowman reflective of the entire committee? And were their opinions based entirely on this incident, even though some had not actually heard it? Did Mr. Bowman respond to requests to hear his side of the story? None of which changes his statements, but we've all had times where we've made inappropriate statements, and clearly this was not intended to be public. It's unfortunate it became so. So to this committee, we have a job to do. Each of us should focus on the goal of bringing positive change to our school infrastructure. Anything else is a waste of time. To incident that was more unfortunate because of the choice of words. I felt disrespected, just as I'm appalled sometimes at the things that we hear, not only this one. But I think it's time that we recognize our responsibilities and be the leaders of the community. I don't disagree with Peter Talbot. If I am convinced that indeed the facts that I got from the committee were incorrect, I found it difficult to vote to remove Matt. But Matt, you saved me from my last thing because you offered an apology. I am prepared to say that I accept your apology or your resignation, and I haven't taken that off the table because I think we need to be really, really concerned about the ability for this committee to work together. It's unfortunate that it's come down to this, but we all have to stop and think and make sure that we stay focused on the main focus of this committee. And to lose very talented, very creative, very confident people, women and men, if these statements were made to men, I would be equally appalled. So I don't see this as primarily women. I see it as basically a totally indecent comment. And Matt, if your comments are sincere and you sincerely apologize, I would expect your behavior to change here in this committee and at any time when you're representing the town of Cheshire. If I feel that that is not you're not able to do that, I will clearly stand up and ask for your resignation.
Thank you, Mrs. Nichols. Mr. Gossenberg. You're on mute, Rich.
There we go. I want to start off by saying I've had the wonderful opportunity so far working in this committee to have chaired one of the subcommittees and sat on another subcommittee, which contained each of the women that we've talked about here. Myself, Jen, Anne Marie spent weeks together going around to the various schools talking to staff. Sylvia chaired a committee that consisted of myself and Anne and Matt. And I have to say, every one of the women that we've talked about here have been insightful, have been thoughtful, and have offered a tremendous amount to this committee. The evening that we spoke about here when Matt made this comment, in fact, was an evening when Sylvia and I had spent over a week developing a presentation on the work of the subcommittee and found that it was a very valuable evening. When I heard of the comments, I was absolutely floored because everything that had happened that evening appeared to me to have been very positive and moved the committee along. Matt could have been a very effective member of the School Modernization Committee. He's knowledgeable about the Cheshire school facilities. He's actively worked to analyze data. He's looked for potential construction options. His comments, though, were clearly inappropriate and denigrating to the women of the committee, and I condemn these words. His comment has substantially slowed down the work of this committee over the past 9 weeks. During these 9 weeks, Matt has not publicly apologized for his comments. And until I heard this evening, he had not contacted the women individually, and in fact only spoke to one of those. Matt's comments have resulted in the loss of our chairperson and potentially one or more other members of this committee. As a school principal, I've had multiple workshops over the years in the area of sexual harassment. And creating a hostile environment is exactly what's happened here. People who have volunteered, who have given their time and their energy, who did this strictly to support the children of our town, have felt attacked and denigrated. I condemn that process, and I think that it'll be very, very hard to move ahead if Matt remains a member of this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Gothenberg. Mr. Nat?
Thank you, Renee. So in the interest of transparency, I'll let everybody know that I am actually married to Matt's niece, so I will abstain from any vote that might come from this matter. But I can assure you all that does not play any factor in my opinion regarding his words and the damage that it's done to the committee. In this case, I mean, you can't put toothpaste back in the tube. So an apology from Matt, it doesn't undo, it won't undo any of his words or his actions from that time ago. What I think is lost here is that the committee has lost some credibility with the public as a result of the incident and the inaction that's followed over the last several weeks. I think we can only look forward. And if Matt's presence and his words are going to be an obstacle towards this committee meeting its end goal, or any of the members of this committee contributing to meet that end goal and continuing to be a part of the committee, then I would agree that Matt should either be removed or more appropriately resign from the committee so we may continue our work as efficient and expeditiously as possible. I could say I personally will not let this incident or Matt's presence disrupt or sidetrack any of my work on this committee in any way, but I completely understand if others may feel differently given the circumstances. I'll echo that. I volunteered and was appointed to this committee to offer my experience and expertise as a voice of the public as we develop a fiscally responsible plan to modernize our school system. I do not believe it is in the breadth of my responsibility to this committee or to the town to facilitate a decision on a personnel matter related to a committee member that was appointed by the town council and or board of education. I think that should lie with the town council and or board of education, the appointing committees. That's all.
Mr. Perugini.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Chuck. Thanks, Renee. First, to Ann, Sylvia, Jen, and Arnett. Although Arnett didn't speak. First of all, I know if I was on the receiving end of those comments, and a little transparency, unfortunately, I was not at that meeting the night that the comments were made. However, the next morning, I did get a phone call from Anne Marie, and did speak to a couple of committee members and got some background on what had transpired. But I was not there. I'm sure if I was there and heard that, I'd probably be appalled myself. Certainly if comments were made from female members to male members, I'd probably be upset as well. So I thank you, all of you, for being the strong colleagues that you are, regardless of this event, for speaking up, for speaking out, for speaking for what you believe in. I'm disappointed that we lost Anne Marie. I think she's doing a great job as chair. I'm disappointed that we're losing more members. I am the kind of person that would rather fight, stay and fight, and prove people wrong by moving forward. However, I'm not in your shoes, and I can't force you to stay. I hope we don't lose more people. I am disappointed by the comments. I didn't hear them. I know town council did their analysis. I was not involved with that. I was not interviewed. No one called me. And if they did, I'm not sure I could say it was not there. I will tell you this. I did speak with Anne Marie Kemp the morning after. Actually, it was probably a day or two later. And by that time, she'd spoken to most of the members, according to her. I asked if it was possible to get the committee together to hear Matt's side of the story. And she said no. Because there were members in the committee that would quit if Matt stayed on. So I don't know if I can't back up Matt's or the accusation against Matt that he never tried to make an apology attempt. I know I brought up a few times with Anne Marie as recently as 2 weeks ago, because while I can't say on the Board of Ed, or quite frankly, any other town body, that we've had an experience like this, I can tell you on the Board of Ed that when people weren't coming together, the group wasn't gelling, or was an issue, we try to resolve it. We try to resolve it in our own group, try to talk about it if people felt comfortable. And I feel like we lost that opportunity because now it's almost, 2 months later? We should have had a discussion that week. We should have confronted as a committee. We all should have met, those that felt comfortable. I know I keep hearing that the committee made a decision, the committee sent a letter to the town council. No one asked me. I did tell Marie I would support whatever she wanted to do, but at that point, we never made a decision as a committee. We never met, we never voted, we never discussed it. I think that is a big mistake. I think that's added a ton of animosity. It wouldn't have changed what was said, but at least we could have had a discussion 2 months ago. And perhaps if there was a collective effort from the committee on how we felt and want to proceed, that might have persuaded the town council to move a little differently. I can't speak to that process, but I am disappointed by all this. I'm disappointed my colleagues feel that they're in an environment that's not supportive. I think we have some very strong people on this committee. I think you folks are incredibly intelligent. You've done a lot of work here so far. I can tell you back for the board and school district, we've moved pretty quick. Your hearts are in this. And as Renee said at the beginning of the regular meeting, he put up pictures of his kids. We have 4,200 kids in our school system, another 400 to 500 employees, stakeholders that are counting on this committee to lead by example, get to the finish line. I would rather this committee try to work together to get through this, but I'm going to respect everyone's decisions. Can't force you to do what you don't feel comfortable doing. The fact that you're speaking out tonight, thank you. I don't know what decision this committee can make. I don't know what authority that we have, because it is a committee appointed by the town council. The Board of Ed has no say in this committee by town charter. But what people don't know is when this committee was formed, town council did reach out to us, and we had 3 folks in the Board of Ed and 3 folks in the town council to help select these folks. So moving forward, if this committee holds and we have vacancies to fill, I would hate doing that because I really enjoy working with almost everyone here. I hope we don't have to do that, but if we do that, I hope we can make a selection process together moving forward. So, Chuck, I know you said the Board of Ed, but I would never tell town council what to do. And likewise, unfortunately, fortunately, this is a town council committee. We knew this when it was set up. We knew it was set up by a town charter. So the Board of Ed, I can tell you, is not pleased by all this. We're all disappointed, but we still trust this committee to move forward. And at the end of the day, I think what matters the most is people have to do what they feel comfortable, what they believe is right. I would want to see a decision come out of this committee with our school plan, whatever that may be, that was around fairness, where everybody had a say in it, where it was well vetted, and it was without controversy. And my concern at this point is, I don't know what, well, I guess I do, just hearing tonight that, obviously this is a dynamic that the committee is trying to overcome. And I don't want to carry that the rest of this process. So I don't know what to say. I'm not sure what to do in this matter. I definitely condemn Matt's statements. I've known Matt for a long time. We're not the best of friends. We're acquaintances. I know he has a big heart, just like everyone else here does too. We all say things that we wish we never said. In this case, if it creates animosity in this group, I don't know how that's going to help us move forward. So I'm struggling with this. I'm struggling that it happened. I wish we can keep everybody together. I don't want to see people leave. Peter, disappoints me. You're stepping down. You're a key person on this project. So is Jennifer. So is Ann. So is Anne Marie. So is Sylvia. So I don't know. I hope we can work through this. I just wish we had this conversation 2 months ago. Even if it had the same result or someone stepped down, at least we could have come together sooner than later. And unfortunately, this is one of those events that I guess as a committee, we've never really gelled, right? We've met, we have some camaraderie, but we never faced an extreme adversity, a small one. So to speak. We just jumped into this one, and I felt too much time went by. But at the end of the day, I'll support what this group wants to do. I would hate to see this committee fall apart. I respect all of you. And, Ann, you made some comments earlier that the male leadership in this town holds us still as a women. I hope that does not include me, because I do consider myself, as chair of the board, someone as a leader in this town. I don't think we could paint a brush stroke like that against everybody. So I hope we would clarify what that statement meant. But beyond that, we've got to come together. And I think the way we do that is supporting each other. So Renee, thanks for that few minutes. I'm sorry if I want to go over. I'm not sure what to say. I don't do well prepared statements, but it's very disappointing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perugini. Mr. Walsh?
Thank you, Renee. First, I too want to apologize to Jen and Sylvia and Ann and Anne Marie for being at the end of those comments. Having 3 sisters and being the only boy in the family, I understand the respect of women. And Anne, I was a little appalled at your comments about the male leadership, because I consider me wanting the male leadership. And I feel that your comments, like Tony said, putting a broad stroke on this is really unfair to all men in this community who take active roles, who volunteer their time. So I'm appalled by your comment like that, because I think that's unfair to all men who are involved in volunteering their time. When I was first elected to the town council last November, I was excited to join a group who would help make important decisions to move our town forward, to keep it an enjoyable place to live, to raise a family. Then COVID hit and things changed dramatically. We were just beginning our budget process. I was trying to maneuver my way around Zoom calls, and it was not an easy thing to do, because being a first-time member of the town council and trying to figure out all the budget items, and then with the Zoom, it was difficult. But I was able to maneuver my way through well enough, I believe. I was also excited to be appointed to the SMC to replace Paul Bowman. I felt this was an extremely important group that will determine the future of our school infrastructure. I was impressed with the diverse knowledge that everyone brought to the table, and I know that we would be able to create a great plan for our town. Unfortunately, the comments made by Mr. Bowman on June 1st basically derailed this committee. And for the past 2 months, there were a lot of talking and disagreements on how to handle this situation. I don't think there was a perfect way to handle this situation. I was one of a few people who was still on the Zoom call when the comments were made, although I was in the process of hanging up since the meeting was over and I only heard the beginning part. I found his statements to be way out of line and very disrespectful. As the days went on, I was expecting an email to come from our chairperson asking for another meeting to air out the issue, but that didn't come. I, like Tony, received a phone call from her telling me that she was going to ask the town council to remove Matt from the committee. When I asked her, what do the other committee members feel, she told me that there were 4 people who were ready to resign, and that was enough for her. I was rather surprised at the route she chose to take. Unfortunately, removing somebody from a committee is not a quick process. So we needed to follow the direction of our town ordinance in this situation, just like Peter said. As the weeks went on, I had the opportunity to talk with several of the members of the SMC and found out that they were not part of this decision as well. I was also told that Mr. Bowman was not going to be given an opportunity to apologize. This bothered me in several ways. I'm sure we have all said things out of frustration and assumed we were doing it in the privacy of our own home. I know I have. As we all know, Zoom meetings are a little different in the way people can be seen and heard. Unfortunately, this meeting was not turned off when it concluded, and Mr. Bowman's private phone call was heard. I'm not excusing anything that he said. Again, they were way out of line, and he needs to own that. I am putting it into context, and I feel an apology was in order, and to allow the committee to hear it. Accept it. Forgive him and move on. That is how I look at things. And I can understand how some women, especially, may not want to forgive that statement. And I'm sorry for that. If another matter comes up with him, however, believe me, we will deal with it in a much harsher way. And Jen, I will guarantee you, if anybody shows any disrespect to women, men, or other members of this of the town, I will step up and say something. I feel bad that I have not done that in the past, but I don't feel anybody should be disrespected, especially those who are volunteering their time. The town council has condemned what Mr. Bowman said and felt that we should be offered a chance to hear his apology. The committee needed to hear his apology, which I would appreciate that he did give tonight. I also want to address one other issue, which Ann Harrigan said, that Rob orchestrated this. Just so you understand, Ann and the rest of the committee, when we were discussing anything to do with this phone call, Rob stayed out of it. Rob did not participate in any conversations about what we were discussing. Sylvia and Peter can acknowledge that too. And when we were discussing it, Rob, for the most part, stayed quiet on it. So I don't know where you're getting that he orchestrated this whole thing from, but that can't be furthest from the truth. I'm also disturbed by the actions that Anne took when she decided to sidestep our town charter prescribed process by sending letters to media outlets and other groups discussing this issue, including statements about the town council chair and our town council caucus. Her statements are unfounded and, in my opinion, compromise the integrity of the process. Our town council chair works tirelessly for this community, and it's disgusting to see how ugly and unproductive people can be for a political gain. I stand by him and our entire caucus. This is not what I signed up for. It is time we put our differences aside, keep moving forward, keep this town and its school infrastructure growing and making it a better place to raise our children and to educate our children. I'm hoping that this ends tonight and we'll be able to get back to what we have been asked to do. Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chair, if I may,
Thank you, Mr.
and I
President.
apologize, Andrew, I know that you wanted to get in. One of the things that I'd like to clear up before we move forward, there appears to be some misunderstanding about whether Chairwoman Kemp had support from this committee to send a letter to the town council. So just by a show of hands, is there anyone that serves on the School Modernization Committee that did not support Anne Marie sending the letter to the town council? I see no hands, so I'll take that as unanimous. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot.
Renee, may I just make one statement? I appreciate Mr. Talbot making that grandstand on that, but also it was important at the beginning of this process when it first happened, whether she reached out to the people, which we found out she did not. Whether 2 months later, do we agree that the letter should have been sent out? I think that's a moot point. I think at the time when we felt that it was still a very hot topic within 2 days, we should have dealt with it then. And that's my opinion. But, I will stand by it when the letter came saying with the full support of the committee, when the full committee was not spoken to.
I will beg your indulgence again, Mr. Vice Chair, and accept a show of hands of anyone that was not contacted either by the chair or the vice chair, Anne Marie Kemp or Renee Martinez, within a week after this incident taking place. Seeing no hands, back to you, Mr. Walsh.
Okay, I'll say it. Whether they were contacted or were they asked, let's take a raise of hands.
So
Who was asked I want to know, did Anne Marie ask you if she should send a letter to remove Matt?
I'm going to interject here.
Do I get a turn to talk or?
I'm sorry.
Let's stop
Yeah, no,
that
I'm gonna
for a
interject right
second.
here
Get back to
because
this. Andrew, Renee, can you please?
Yeah, the committee is ill-equipped to deal with these issues, and the actions taken by Anne Marie, whether, right now, maybe we should have submitted this to a vote at that time. Maybe that made more sense. Hindsight vision is 2020. So, we could do that right now for all intents and purposes, and it will be the same thing. So, we are trying, or I think Anne Marie and myself, we tried to diffuse this issue in the way that was most, or appeared to be most satisfactory for the committee at the moment. And we didn't know what was going to happen. And again, we're volunteers. We don't do this every day. Last thing we suspected is that this was going to end up where it is right now. So with that, Mr. Martelli.
Sure. I didn't prepare a statement. Maybe I should have. But, I had several probably hour-long discussions with Anne Marie Kemp, and this back and forth about who was contacted and who wasn't contacted. Maybe the town should have weighed in here and given some guidance to volunteers that were running this committee. But the fact of the matter is that Matt said things he shouldn't have said. I've said things I shouldn't have said. I think everyone here on this call has said many things that they shouldn't have said. Always, or in our lives. But can we move forward having Matt on the committee? I think we could sit here and debate this over and over again for hours and hours. Can we move forward? We have got a lot of work done. We have a lot of work ahead of us. We owe it to the town. We owe it to the people in this community to work together. We can't have somebody on here who's going to derail the discussions, or people who will not vote with this person because they just don't simply like the individual. So I think Matt brings a lot to the committee. I don't know Matt very well personally, but if people here can't work with Matt, I also know that there's places and parties and events that when I'm not welcome, and my very presence hinders or derails what needs to take place, then I would man up and I would leave and I would move on. Also, I don't like that in Matt's apology that Anne Marie told him he couldn't apologize. If I got caught saying something and I regretted saying it, I would have stopped at people's houses. I would have called those individuals personally. I would have harassed them until they would at least sit down and give me a moment to talk to them to offer my apology. So saying that you couldn't apologize because you were asked not to, I can't agree with that. So that's about all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Martelli. Do we have any additional statements tonight? Mr. Orr.
Thank you all. And I got a number of things to say about this matter. First and foremost, I certainly will apologize to anyone who was offended by Matt's comments, and especially the 4 women who heard those comments. And I certainly want to say that I abstained from any vote on this matter and did not influence anybody on the town council relative to the decision they made on Tuesday. This issue, in my opinion, relative to me, has been very politicized almost from the beginning, where my involvement in this was completely mischaracterized and completely taken out of context. And once again, Ms. Harrigan, you have chosen to publicly attack me. Early in this process, you started it. You've sent public emails, as Mr. Walsh has said, or correspondence to the press and to other forums where I had been reached out to. Unfortunately, your statements regarding my involvement are false and completely misguided, in just another attempt by you to advance a personal and political agenda against me. My record of serving the Cheshire community is clear for all to see. I'm very proud of my passionate service, which is filled with years of dedication to good governance. I have a long track record of working with a diverse group of people, including many women, and supporting them in roles of leadership. I crossed the aisle as council chair and made Patty Flynn Harris the chairwoman of our ordinance committee, one of our most important committees. Why? Because she, in my opinion, was the most capable to handle those duties on behalf of the community. I have collaborated consistently in my role as a council member and most recently as the chair in crossing the aisle and working with everybody in an effort to collaborate and cooperate so that this community gets good governance, whether you're a Republican, whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a woman, whether you're a man, or anyone else in this community. And I can tell you this, I care very deeply about advancing and completing the mission of this committee. And I believe I have been a very value-added member. I spearheaded the relook at the Alexion property, as well as other more recent opportunities. Ms. Harrigan, you were on that committee and you overlooked it. Not sure why you did, but you did. I think outside of the box in hopes of delivering our community a viable and affordable option. We have so many really important issues to face as a community, and it is a real shame that these agenda-driven attacks against me are detracting us from continuing our good work. And again, I'm speaking about my role that Ms. Harrigan is dragging me into relative to this situation. I did not seek out this conversation. I received a phone call that I answer like I do from anyone and any constituent who reaches out to me. And my role in that conversation is being completely mischaracterized. I think the community sees these attacks against me for what they are. They are personal and they are political. I will end with this. If these misdirected attacks and accusations against me continue, I am fully prepared to vigorously defend my character and reputation through all means available. Thank you for your time, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Orr. Statements. Mrs. Bates.
Thank you. I appreciate Mr. Orris's comments. I appreciate that he apologized for Mr. Bowman's comments. He was part of that conversation. I have no political agenda. I have no vendetta. I have nothing personal against Mr. Orris in any way whatsoever. However, he neglected to apologize for his part in the conversation. And whatever that is, it would be nice to hear that he does condemn it, which he did, but also apologizes for his part in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bates. Mrs. Orris, Mr. Orris.
Yeah, if I could just respond, and thank you, Jen, for your comments. And I think we've always had a pretty good working relationship, so thank you for that. I thought I did apologize, but if anybody thought that I said something that was disparaging against the four women, then of course I apologize. Well, what I am suggesting here is that whatever certain people thought they heard of my role of the conversation, which was on my cell phone as I was heading to my kitchen when I answered my phone, was certainly not disparaging words against any of you. I was concerned and frustrated about certain aspects of the meeting, and that was really it. And so this has been turned into something, in my opinion, that is not in my character or my history. Let's look at what I've done as a sitting member of the council, and most recently as town council chairman. Look at my record. It's clear for all to see.
With all due
I
respect,
don't have a pattern of this kind of conduct anywhere, anyway, anyhow. And so, of course, if anybody thought I said something that was disparaging, I apologize. There is no question about that. I am not looking to attack anybody here personally, but in the same token, I do believe that there is some political motivation behind dragging me into this issue and trying to cast me as somehow a sexist or some other issue. There is nothing in my history that suggests that in any of my role as a council member and or town council chairman. As Mr. Walsh said, I'm the only boy of 3 children. I have 2 older sisters. I have a daughter and a wife I love dearly. I respect them immensely, and I have always conducted myself, I believe, with all of you and everyone in this community, as I've sat at the dais as council chair, with the utmost of respect. And I've crossed the aisle, as I've said, to work with everybody. That record is abundantly clear. For all of you who want to judge me based on some third-hand version of a conversation that a few people think they heard and then mischaracterize that, I think it's completely unfair to me. And I just think it suggests to me that there's other motivations behind it. If Ann Harrigan or anyone else had concerns about what I said, why not pick up the phone and say, hey, Rob, here's what we thought we heard. What's your version of it? No, I didn't get one phone call from anyone saying, geez, Rob, I'm concerned about what you said. Let's talk about it. It didn't happen. So because of that and everything that's going on, I question the motives behind this.
thank you for your response. With all due respect, I know you have a great record for serving the town, and it's really not about that. It's really just about that one incident, and I appreciate your apology, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gossenberg.
Just a very quick comment. It disturbs me greatly that we have gone from a conversation regarding what Matt said on that evening and how appropriate or inappropriate it was and whether he should remain on this committee to an attack on the women of this committee. to an attack on Ann Harrigan, to an attack on Anne Marie. When you listen to the video of this, you're going to find that there was a huge shift in this meeting in the last 10 minutes. And I think it's going to do tremendous damage to this committee. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Gossenberg. Mrs. Harrigan.
Yeah, I just want to very quickly dispel some untruths that were spoken by Mr. Walsh and Mr. Orris. I released nothing to the press. I wrote one letter to my DTC because one of our members, an elected official, had done something egregious, and I feel like the people who support and put forth our elected people need to know what's happening. So I would just like to say that it got to the press. It was not me. I didn't mean for this to be a public display. I suspect that the reason that none of this came out, your part in the conversation, Mr. Orris, was because it would just be a he said, she said situation. And, there's nothing I can do about that. But you were part of that conversation. You did participate. Matt Bowman was not in a conversation with himself. And I did hear your voice. And I'm offended. So I too, like Jen, I appreciate that you apologize for your part in that conversation. That's all.
Thank you, Mrs. Harrigan. Mr. Bowen.
I just want to clarify a few things. Again, now that we are public, I will publicly say I would like to take this opportunity to formally apologize for the comment I made after the SMC meeting on June 1st. In particular, I'd like to apologize to Anne Marie Kemp, Sylvia Nichols, Ann Harrigan, Jen Bates, and especially Arnett Talbot. I expressed my frustration with the committee in a private conversation, which I regret. Some of you may understand that on rare occasions, we may say something that we wish we had never said. This is how I felt at this time. My hope is that the committee can all come together and put this behind us and accomplish what we were asked to accomplish by the town council. I'm going to say a few other things, which I probably will regret someday, but Ann Harrigan, you opposed me from day one. When this committee was selected, it is absolutely on the record, it's no secret that you opposed my appointment to this committee. Vehemently opposed it. In your letter to the Democratic Town Committee dated June 30th, 2020, which I have a copy of, I suppose it's no real surprise that two members who committed the egregious affront to the women of the committee were elected to offices rather than selected to the committee for their diverse expertise. Well, that is wrong. I was selected to this committee because of my expertise of the schools. I have worked in those schools for the past 50 years. I know those schools better than any person on this committee. I can't say enough how sorry I am for saying what I said. But I will tell you this. In the last 50 years, for the town of Cheshire, I have held various roles. I have worked tirelessly for this town. It has been my honor to serve this town on the following boards, commissions, public and private organizations: the United States Marine Corps, the Auxiliary Police in Cheshire, part of the Civil Defense Systems, the United States Marine Corps Reserve. I was a supernumerary policeman because of our small town. Civilians with previous military experience were called upon and trained to be there when there was a shortage of our regular police officers. I was on the board of directors of the Chamber of Commerce. I was the president of the Chamber of Commerce. I was a member of the Cheshire Rotary Club for over 15 years. I was a member of the Public Building Commission, the Economic Development Commission, the Park and Rec Commission, the Beautification Commission, the Inland Wetlands Commission, the Water Pollution Control Authority, the Turf Committee. I was chairman of the West Main Street Streetscape Committee, which after 15 months of negotiating with the Department of Transportation for the state of Connecticut, we approved a trail crossing on West Main Street, which now safely crosses thousands of pedestrians each year. I had served in volunteer programs for different youth organizations and high school organizations. I regret what I said. I'm sorry. I said it. I can't take it back. But for the service that I've given this community, for one mistake, you want to throw me under the bus. Well, I will tell you, I'm not going to resign. I will fight this vehemently. I said what I said. I'm sorry. I've served this town and this community too much to make one mistake and be thrown away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Do we have any additional statements? Mr. Perugini?
I had a quick question, and Peter, if I'm putting a spot, I apologize, not my intent, but Jennifer, first you sort of being in a meeting that, depending if you felt that the group is supportive, there wouldn't be a hostile environment, that would go a long way in your decision to stay on the committee. You're going to decide what you have to decide. I hope you would not leave, and I hope you don't leave. Peter, I honestly don't know. Again, maybe being selfish here, just hoping for the best. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anybody else, but I'm not sure what you leaving the committee accomplishes, Peter. I don't know if your issues with town council, whatever happened there, but I do see you, all of us, and Jennifer, Sylvia as key members. And my opinion is, you win by doing what's right and fighting and proving why you're here, and you deserve to be here. So I hope this committee can move forward, but I respect all your decisions. I don't know how I can help you, but I will certainly do what's best for this committee, for the women here. We need to have a collegial environment, I should say. But I'm grasping for ideas on how to move forward. There's obviously some animosity, but again, I thank everyone for speaking out tonight. And I wish, and I'm not knocking Emery at all, but I wish we had this conversation 2 months ago. But as chair, we put faith in her when we elected her to help make decisions. At the time, she felt after talking to most folks that if we had this kind of meeting, people would leave. So we never had a chance to have this meeting. I've learned some things tonight. And again, I was not there. I've learned my lesson a long time ago, not to be on third, fourth hand information, let alone what happened. So I appreciate everybody, Rob, speaking your details. It takes a lot of courage to admit mistakes. It takes a lot of courage to speak what is right. I think as a group, if we carry that forward, but I don't want to see anybody leave, but I'll respect your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perugini.
Renee?
Nichols?
Yeah, I concur with Tony, and I also would like to say that I respect since I was involved as one of the people named in this conversation, I agree with Ann, I agree with Jen. It was appalling behavior, but I also see what's happening to this committee, and that makes me very sad that we cannot put these things behind us, accept Matt's apology, and move forward. And I think it's been said before, Tony said it before, and several other people said, we all make mistakes, and we all have regretted some of the statements that we've made. But for me personally, as I've sat on the council for 10 years, I have been in many situations where I felt either that my voice wasn't heard or whatever, that people didn't agree with the decision I made. But I I stood by what I was doing and I paid attention to the job at hand. I don't believe I would have been elected 5 times if people didn't see that I was serious about following the goals that we set out. And in this committee, our goal is to provide a wonderful product to our town and a wonderful path to increasing the ability of educating our children in a more modern way. I respect everybody that's on this committee. We all were selected for the committee because we brought a certain dynamic to the committee, and that's important and it should remain that way. I would hate to see, Jen, I would hate to lose you on this committee, and you were on my subcommittee. I would hate to lose you on that committee because of the actions that were a one-time incident. Matt, I really believe that this has become a learning experience for all of us to see the result of what we say. We teach our children not to speak ill of other people, no matter where you are. One of my family things was always, my mother always told us, remember who you are and what you represent. We couldn't figure out what that was, but she taught us by example that it was being respectful to everybody. And if you had bad things to say, you kept them to yourself. I will not let this derail my presence on this committee for however I can be productive and helpful. Matt, I will expect never to hear anything like that from you again. I think that you have found that this was a painful thing. I also agree that if you'd picked up the phone the following morning and called me and said, hey, you know, I instead of giving a flip remark when I kidded you about turning off the phone, I might have been more willing to be forgiving right at the time. I think that would have been my point. And I perhaps should have picked up the phone and asked you to do that. I did not. I felt you were the one who made the statement. You needed to apologize to us. So look, we've all made mistakes in this. It's all been a nasty situation. Frankly, I am so tired of it. This is like a kid's argument on the playground. He said, she said, whatever, whatever. Can we please put it aside, put our committee back together again and do good things for this and not hold, we all recognize this was a bad situation. We all recognize this was something that should never have happened. It did. We have discussed it. We have all let our feelings be known. Let us do the right thing and move forward and stay on this committee and work to do what we were selected to do. I hope you can do that. If you can't do that, I can't force you to stay on the committee. Peter, I understand your fervor and your concern. I think that your issue may be less about the particular incident and more about the council situation. I would hate to see you resign from this committee, but again, if that's what you choose to do, I would respect that as I respect every decision you make. You know that we've worked together for lots and lots and lots of years for chamber and all those other things. So can we please just put this aside, learn from our mistakes, hold ourselves accountable for our actions, apologize when we need to, and move on. That's what I hope can come out of this meeting tonight. So
thank you, Sylvia. I think that we've heard statements from pretty much everybody here tonight. I think we've learned a lot. I think we've aired out a lot of the feelings, and with these statements, I think we pretty much know where everyone stands and what has to say about the issue. We also heard the apologies, and I think that was necessary for us as a group to potentially continue this healing process and go back and being productive and advancing what we were asked to do for the schools. So I want to go back to my initial opening statement for this agenda item. With everything that we've learned today, is there a way that we can move forward? From what I've heard, I don't know, but I think we've spent the last hour and a half listening and debating and learning about what others think. I think that we have some thinking to do. And, you know, without laboring the situation, I would like to call to move to the next agenda item and just let us sleep on this. Let us reflect on it. And I'm sure that coming tomorrow, coming the end of this week, we'll know what the decisions are from the respective committee members. I don't think this is nothing to take lightly. The mission, as I said initially, is big. So any decision that we make needs to be put in the balance. So Mr. Perugini,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'll wait till you're done.
please go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask a point of order. You brought up a decision to make. I honestly, again, I apologize. I did not read the town charter completely on how, what the powers of this commission are. I know Arnett early on gave us a guideline, but quite frankly, I don't know what decision or action this committee can take. So maybe if there is one to take, so maybe between now and when we reconvene again, if maybe you can consult with Al and Arnett and town leadership to see what action can this committee take, if any, if there should be one taken at all. Because we keep saying that, but I don't know what that means.
Right, I'm not sure either, and I have seek counsel as to what a potential action could be. And as I said initially, I think this committee is ill-equipped to deal with these issues. So other than condemn the action and offer our points, and for committee members for potentially resign, I don't think it's productive to take any other type of action. Even voting to send it back to the town council doesn't really mean that any action will be taken by the town council at that time. So I question whether that is productive or not, and I've been reflecting on that over the weekend myself. So I agree with you. I think we have a lot to think about and seek additional counsel as to how to move forward.
Can I just make one last comment? I think it is it's incumbent on all of us to take the personal responsibility to make a decision. And if we feel that we cannot move forward because of this and we need to resign, then that's what we have to do. But if we feel that we are committed to this process and we can accept the apology and move on, then we continue the way we are. But I think the committee as a whole is divided into, how many of us are there, 13 or 12? Each one of us has a responsibility to commit to either not being able to manage this way or being able to look beyond it and move forward to the process that we have. And so I don't know that there's a committee action specifically that has to be done, but a commitment that we have to make to each other as a committee that says, I can do this or I can't. And that's
right. And thank you, Mrs. Nichols. I would agree with that. I'll be contacting and be in touch with the committee members to see what the respective positions are. But I agree with that. I think that we'll need to reflect and see if individually we can continue to be productive in the group or not. And I would expect that people do that as expeditiously as possible for the benefit of the community and the SMC as a whole. So I'm hoping that everybody can make the decision and one way or the other commit to it and allow the group to move forward.
Thank you.
So with that, I'm going to address the next agenda item, public comment. So I'll ask staff if any public comment has been posted into the website.
There have been none. No comments.
Okay, so at this point, I'll be seeking a motion to adjourn.
I'll move that we adjourn the executive session. That's what we're in now, right? This is official.
No, we adjourned about an hour and a half.
But this, oh no,
From executive
not
session.
that. All right, then I moved that we adjourn this meeting. Right. Okay. I forgot where we were. So I move we adjourn this meeting. Right.
I second. Oh, Rich beat me.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you very much.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.